I'm the type of person, I just dive into things. So I'll try something, and if it doesn't work, I try something else. And so I might not be right the first 2, 3, 4 times, but I'll keep trying until I make it work. But in this situation, we had to make it work.
Leadership is everywhere. In our work, in our family, in our community. We see leaders by their actions. We know their legacy. This podcast is about leaders, people just like you, doing amazing things every day. I hope these stories inspire you, they motivate you, and they fuel your leadership legacy.
Hi, and welcome to Ignite, the podcast for leadership. In this podcast, you're going to hear stories about leaders doing great things that demonstrate their skills. Today, we have a guest with us, Susannah Peddie, who is the owner of 2 companies. One is Sweaty Girl Clothing, and the other is Southern Comfort Properties. Susannah is going to talk a lot about creativity, and research shows that right now, innovation is one of the top 10 skills that affect business and leadership in the workplace. Through the stories by Susannah, you're going to hear a lot about creativity and innovation. Susannah has been recognized by her community with a 40 Under 40 award, an Impact Award, and she has made the Girl Scouts Who Makes a Difference list. Today, Susannah is going to share some of her creative solutions in overcoming adversity. That's all coming up next on Ignite.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used IT Pro TV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without IT Pro TV I wouldn't be where I was today, because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
Welcome back to Ignite. We are here today with Susannah Peddie, and Susannah is an entrepreneur extraordinaire. Welcome, Susannah, to Ignite.
Thank you, Vicki. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very honored to be your guest.
We're so happy to hear that you're here and able to share some of your stories. Just for the listeners and the viewers, Susannah has so many experiences over the journey of the last, I don't know how many years, but every time I speak to you, your stories really inspire me in terms of how we can adapt and change and grow in our careers, and they don't even have to look exactly the same every single time. You are currently the owner of Southern Comfort Properties. You're the owner of Sweaty Girl Clothing. We're going to talk about all of that in just a little bit, but first I really wanted to start out by asking you to share with us a little bit about your early days, your career. You started your career in the finance industry, which is not what you're currently doing today. So tell us a little bit about that and your journey.
Sure. My first career was in finance, and I worked in New York City on Wall Street, and it was great. I learned a lot, and finally decided to get out of New York. So I became a financial advisor down in Florida. And while I loved the challenge, I loved the customers, I loved the company, I did not like not being in control of my product. My product was the stock market. And as we all know, nobody controls it. And no matter how good a service I provided or advice I provided, it was very tough. I'm a very sensitive person and I care. And so it was very hard not to be in control. So I eventually, over a series of interesting missteps and mishaps, ended up in the real estate industry, not selling and buying for other people, but I do short-term rentals such as Airbnb, VRBO, corporate housing, and I really love it because I get to know the guests and I am in control of the product as much as I can be. You know, there are things that happen that I'm not in control of, but I can pretty much control 90% of it. So it makes me a lot happier and more fulfilled than the finance side of the job or my past career.
So you're still in a very business-focused area, and boy, I wish you could control the stock market because we would all be, much more prosperous if we knew what does control that. So getting out of that was probably, it sounded like a little bit frustrating for you. How did that happen? I mean, you can't just go from, I guess you can, you did, just go from working on Wall Street, being in a financial sector, to then buying and sell real estate on your own. Tell us a little bit about how did that occur for you? What was that journey? How did that feel? Give us a little bit of the background.
Sure. So I had a little son about 12 years ago, and until he was 2, I worked in finance, and I decided to take a little break. It was pretty much coincided with the last crash in the market, and Philip turning 2, my son, and deciding that it was time to take a little break. So I did. However, I can't stay still or not do anything. So I got back into my photography and tried to make a little money selling those. But there is a term called starving artist for a reason. So that didn't quite work out as well. We also had purchased real estate, speculative real estate in 2006 at the height of the market. And by 2008, 2009, everything had crashed. So we couldn't sell them. I had to figure out something to do with them. And so I at first focused on keeping them full with long-term tenants, but we also had a fully furnished rental house right next door to us. And I had put that on Airbnb and VRBO and rented it out. And lo and behold, a friend of ours was in need of housing due to a kind of a tragic issue. And I ended up having 2 empty apartments that should have been rented long term, but it was a very bad market. I furnished one fully and within 4 days flat, and I moved the people who I had contracts with and let them stay at the new place for free, kind of as my guinea pigs there. And it worked out. And we had 9 of these condos at the time. I had another empty one, and they kept staying full. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll furnish another one. And I did. And then eventually I turned all of them into fully furnished units, bought some more. Some didn't work out because they were in the wrong location. So I would sell those and then buy more. And then I expanded by just trying different markets by renting unfurnished apartments, furnishing them, and then subletting them. So that's the way that it happened. It was some fate, a lot of fate, I guess. But it worked out, and you had to be a little bit creative to figure out how to solve these problems of negative cash flow in the market, and it worked.
Well, you mentioned fate being a part of it, and I'm a believer that really, especially in business, we create our fate, right? So that you have to take the steps to create whatever you have in your existence. And so you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned missteps. You mentioned the market crashing, all of which can be absolutely devastating to somebody. And I'm sure it was a really stressful time for you.
It was absolutely stressful. And but out of that stress came, you have to be creative, and you have to. I'm the type of person, I just dive into things. So I'll try something, and if it doesn't work, I try something else. And so I might not be right the first 2, 3, 4 times, but I'll keep trying until I make it work. But in this situation, we had to make it work, because we had a mortgage on the properties. They were negative cash flow, and we couldn't sell them because they were underwater with the mortgage. And so I just kind of took new fads that were in the market. Airbnb was fairly new. VRBO was not new, but nobody had really tried, that I had known of, tried short-term housing in my city. And so I gave it a try, and it worked. And you learn, you have to just keep going when you fail. And I've failed quite a few times, and you can't let it get you down. You just have to keep going.
Yeah,
and trying a new route.
And hopefully we just learn from those experiences.
Absolutely.
The experiences that you had in the financial sector, when you worked in Wall Street and when you also worked as a financial advisor, did that help you overcome some of the fear of risk in the real estate market? That's
a good question. It did, because I think I did learn how to analyze things from a mathematical economic standpoint, which was very helpful. I knew how to keep books and a little bit of accounting, which was helpful. So it did, because I definitely had to put up with a lot of ups and downs in the finance market, and with unhappy customers, and how to rectify things if they go wrong. So I would absolutely say that I was able to apply many of my lessons from finance into the current career.
Because it sounds like they're vastly different, but they probably do build upon each other. And I know that when I've worked with people in corporations, and we've talked about them being in leadership positions where they've had to face their fears and they've had to think creatively about how to solve problems. Sometimes people don't react the way you have, and they either freeze or they make the same mistakes over and over. Can you give us some idea of how you were able to come up with the ideas? You said you turned around an apartment in 4 days, furnished it. That's a talent, I believe. I certainly wouldn't be able to do that. What was it that enabled you to take those steps in kind of creating your own fate?
Well, I have to admit, some of it is a little bit of desperation, and I get very creative when I'm stressed or in a situation that I have to fix. I don't have a choice. And so it kind of ignites my creativity, which I'm a creative person to begin with, thankfully. So it's very helpful to be creative and not worry so much about everything being perfect. I'm not a perfectionist, and that actually helps me because I've found that perfectionists have a hard time completing a project, whereas I will get where I think it's workable, and then I'll fix things along the way. And so I have found that helpful for me because I'm not stifled by worrying about if something's perfect or not. And I don't know if everybody follows that, but it works for me and all of my businesses, actually.
Yeah, and I can tell you that not everybody does that. I actually have done a lot of research recently on women in business in particular. And we know for a fact that many women suffer from the case of perfectionism when it comes to business. And so sometimes women in general, and I know this is a stereotype, it's not all women, obviously, but oftentimes we want things to be perfect before we can move on and make decisions and make things happen and create impact in our environment. But it sounds like you're able to overcome some of that, and that's really helped you in getting results.
Absolutely. I have definitely, I would say probably one of the things that irritates my husband is that I'm not a perfectionist, but it has been very helpful for me from a business perspective, especially when I want to try something new. For instance, on my creative side, I have always loved art. And I found photography to be a good fit because I've never had the patience to sit down for hours. I can paint, I can draw, but I don't have the patience. So I found that photography was perfect for me because it's quick. I have an image within an hour, or I have 100 images within an hour. I did find that not everybody needs art all the time. And once you fill your walls, you don't need any more art. So it was hard to get traction in that market, which I did try to do. I would have art shows, I would market, I did everything. But, if there's not a demand, there's not a demand. So I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I could put some art on clothing. Everybody always needs clothes, especially women. We constantly change out our fashion. We constantly need clothes. And so I came just in my head, I thought, okay, well, one of my flowers might look good on a dress. So I started designing flower dresses, and I would post them on Facebook. And people would comment and say, where do I get them? And I said, well, they don't actually exist. I have no idea how to make them. I'm just playing fashion plate. And so I thought, well, I'll just have to see if I can find a place, find out how to do this. So I went through probably 15 iterations of dress materials, dress designs, printers, et cetera, until I found something that worked. So I started a company a few years ago called Strawberry Blonde, and I had a business partner, and we made all of our clothing by hand. It was very popular. We did well. We went to Atlanta Apparel Mart. We were finalists in a belt design contest, which was exciting. However, I realized it wasn't scalable. If you have something where you physically have to be present to make the product, it's very hard to scale it. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we didn't win the contest, because they realized there's no way we could make enough for the bulk stores.
That would be a lot of dresses.
It would be a lot of dresses.
Yeah.
So I figured out a whole system of how to get the pictures on fabric, but I needed something where I wouldn't have to have inventory. I wouldn't have to make it. All I would have to do is what I love to do, and that's design. So recently I found a company that will link with a website and with Etsy, and they will actually take all the order. They will print, cut, sew, and ship, which is perfect for me because I don't have to have inventory. They're made to order. If nobody likes one design, there's nothing off my back. So it's perfect. So I'm having a great time expanding that business as a side gig at the moment.
Yeah. And for those that are listening to this podcast, I mean, we're here with Susannah Peddie, and we have been talking so far about not just her company, Southern Comfort Properties, and her experiences in real estate, but also that creative spark that has allowed you, Susannah, to start this Sweaty Girl clothing line. And so far, it's been a big hit. That creative process is really important in all that we do in business. And I love the stories that you're telling us because it really, I could probably write a book about, or there have been books written about the art of critical thinking and being able to be a critical thinker as a leader, whether you're in your personal life, in your career, in working in a corporation. Critical thinking is one of those things that encompasses a lot of variations. One of them is around being able to analyze information, having the ability to interpret that analysis and finding trends in the analysis. But a big chunk of critical thinking is also about how do you creatively think through solutions, especially when you're hit up against a wall. And what I love about what you've shared with us so far is your ability to have missteps and figure out alternative methods and getting things done, working through the crash of the market and being able to figure out ways to turn around what could have been a really bad situation and make it into a positive one. And now I'd love to hear more about the creative outlet in terms of Sweaty Girl clothing. So this is, it seems like a natural progression to you, but to somebody listening, it may not seem so natural to go from Wall Street to designing a clothing line. So can you give us a little bit of insight in terms of the motivation that you have behind the clothing line itself?
Sure. I'm a redhead, as you can see, and I have very fair skin, and I love to be outdoors, but the sun is very harmful to my skin. I get sunburned very easily, and I get freckles. I just need to protect my skin as much as possible. So I play tennis, I paddleboard, I do all sorts of outdoor sports. So I wear long sleeve athletic tops all the time. I practically live in them, but everyone that I found is either solid or striped or just boring. And so I thought, gosh, if I could just design my own athletic tops, I would be thrilled. I could just wear my own designs and be happy. And so I have been searching and searching for a company that would do that for me for years. And finally, one day, one popped up, and I was so excited that I went ahead and designed probably 20 different shirts, posted them. I started selling them before I even got a sample because I was so excited. And I realized not everybody wants to wear long sleeve shirts when they're working out. So I'm starting to create tank tops as well, and I'll probably delve into short sleeve shirts and other kinds of products. Hoping tennis skirts will come up as something that I will be able to print and have printed and cut sew on demand. So I'm evolving as my resources evolve, and I am having such a good time.
It sounds like it. And being a recipient of one of those shirts that you've created, I can say that it's been a great experience to wear it. And everywhere I go, people are like, oh, that's the coolest shirt ever. So anyway, that's a little bit of a promotion for you on that one.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
But, one of the other things that we touched upon is not just that creativity that got you to create Sweaty Girl clothing and Southern Comfort Properties, but also you mentioned several times about kind of resources. Whether it's been internal resources, reaching out to a partner, finding a vendor, finding the right tool. Resourcefulness is another part of leadership that we sometimes take for granted. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you consciously think about what resources do I need, or is that something that has just come natural to you over the period of your career?
It has come naturally to me, to be honest. But once I start a system, I'm a creator. I'm not a backfill. I'm not one who will, I don't like doing the numbers. I don't like doing all of the daily activities. I like doing different things all the time. So for me, finding good resources is finding my opposite and finding somebody who likes routine, who likes to do the backfill, who likes to do the everyday things so I can go out and create. So on the flip side, I would probably be a good resource for somebody who does like routine. If somebody came up with a problem that involved creativity, I think it's good to go to a creative person and hash it out and see if you can get some good advice from somebody. It's very good to have mentors, to ask for advice from people and be open to suggestions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that creative process, I know for me it doesn't come naturally. So I'm going to reach out to you, Susanna, for any time I need that creative. Yeah, but going back to that critical thinking, I mean, honestly, I've read a lot of research in a lot of publications from around leadership in general. And like I said before, that critical thinking skill is scarce. But mostly in that is the creative process. And if we can give people some steps or tools to help them become more creative, that's fantastic. So aside from reaching out to somebody who is creative, what can somebody do? Like what do you do? Or what advice would you give to somebody who is really struggling? Maybe they have tried something and they failed and they feel like they're at a dead end. Is there anything that you can share with our listeners, our viewers, in terms of what steps they can take to kind of find that creative outlet in their solutions?
Sure. I think any creative project you come up with is good for all areas of your life. If you find something that you're passionate about, whether it's coloring, there's the adult coloring books now, and they do help with creativity because you're matching colors and creating. I think anything to expand your mind, to think about something you don't normally think about, will help you become more creative. And for me, it's a daily thing. I constantly am coming up with, I can't help it, new ideas. So I would encourage those who, one, don't have the time to make the time, and find a passion that so you can learn something new. And I think if you practice thinking outside of the box, it'll become your nature, or it'll become easy for you over time.
Well, I don't know about easy, but I know that right now I'm going to make a list of things that I can do to help my creative process flow. So
you should. You'll have fun doing it.
Yeah. So, Susanna, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us today and sharing a little bit about your success that you've had, and sharing a little bit about Southern Comfort Properties, sharing a little bit about Sweaty Girl Clothing. You can find Susanna's information on our podcast. We'll be posting that on our site. And in just a few minutes, we'll be back with more on Ignite.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. IT Pro TV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide, this is important for me to learn. I would recommend IT Pro TV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
Welcome back to Ignite. We hope you enjoyed that discussion with Susanna. She is very creative. Recent research has shown that innovation is one of the top 10 trends affecting business and leadership. Brian Tracy was recently quoted saying that there are 7 qualities of a creative thinker. And I think we heard all of them in our discussion with Susanna. But here are the 7 qualities that Brian Tracy talks about. Ask questions. Practice zero-based thinking, meaning where do I start from here? Change your mind. Admit when you're wrong. Continue to learn. Be goal-oriented. And eliminate your ego. I think that Susanna really empowered and embraced all of us to help us learn how to become more creative thinkers and how to overcome our challenges. From all of us here at Ignite, I'm Vicki Guy. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Ignite. We'll see you next time.